Good evening, Robert Scribbler. It is September 11th, 2018. Thank you for joining me for another climate change and clean energy video blog. This is part two of a segment that I'm doing late this evening on Florence as it approaches the U.S. East Coast. We have just gotten the most recent update from the National Hurricane Center at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what National Hurricane Center is noting is that Florence is basically unchanged in its strength. Its minimum central pressure is 946 millibars, slight increase from the last statement, but basically the same. Maximum sustained winds still at 140 miles an hour. And as you can see from the satellite representation, we see a very healthy central dense overcast circulation with high cold cloud tops, very, very tall thunderstorms circling this raging tropical cyclone as it barrels toward the U.S. East Coast at a west-northwesterly direction and a forward rate of speed of 17 miles per hour. It's a very dangerous Category 4 hurricane that is threatening the Carolinas, both North and South Carolina, as well as parts of southern Virginia. Now, it's worth noting that the most recent National Hurricane Center update has moved the track a bit to the left or a bit to the south, bring it back to a landfall closer to the Wilmington area. So the projected path has again shifted to the south. It's worth noting, in my last video blog, I talked about how we're about 2 days away from first impacts. In all honesty, we're actually about 36 hours away from worst impacts. The National Hurricane Center expects Florence to be a couple hundred miles off the North Carolina coast by 8 a.m. on Thursday, and that would bring sections of the Carolina coast under the influence of tropical storm force winds. So more like about 36 hours before we start to see direct significant impacts from Florence, about 8 a.m. on Thursday, give or take a few hours. Now, it's presently moving very rapidly toward the west-northwest. This forward rate of speed is expected to slow down as the storm approaches the coast, and this slowing forward rate of speed is projected to produce very significant amounts of rainfall from the storm as the center approaches and as it crosses land. Now, the National Hurricane Center is projecting 20 inches of rain or more in the region near and to the north of where Florence makes landfall, with a very wide swath of extraordinarily heavy precipitation in the range of 6 to 20 inches or more. It's worth noting that we have seen some rather extreme models over the past 12 hours or so projecting extraordinarily heavy rainfall amounts for the coastal sections of southern North Carolina as well as the northern coastal sections of South Carolina, in the range of 15 to as much as 44 inches in some locations. Now, this is just one model projection, but it's the Euro model. But it's worth noting that some of the models are spitting out some very extreme potentials for heavy precipitation that they don't exceed the near 60-inch totals that occurred in Harvey. The totals are starting to get into a range where they might be comparable to Harvey, and 46 inches of rain over a couple day period is just ridiculously significant. The only mitigating factor being that these heavy rains are predicted close to shore, so that much of the rain might just flush out into the ocean and produce potentially less intense flash flooding impacts. However, still a very serious situation for North Carolina, South Carolina, and possibly parts of northern Georgia, as the National Hurricane Center is projecting the remnants of Florence to drift west and possibly get picked up in a trough and recircle over the Ohio River Valley, continuing to dump significant amounts of rain. So this is a situation that we need to monitor. There is already a trough laying over the southeast U.S., and many regions of the southeast U.S. have already seen very significant rainfall amounts this summer, so grounds are saturated, and another extreme rainfall event on top of the heavy rains that we have already seen this summer could be a rather significant event. Now, I'd also like to talk a bit about storm surge flooding. I'm going to look at this model that is provided by NOAA and see if we can zoom in here. Now, I just want to note that I did evacuate from, let's zoom back out, looks like we lost it. I did evacuate from the Myrtle Beach area, a region called Murrells Inlet, which is right here, and they're presently projecting some minor coastal flooding, possibly 1 foot above ground level along the barrier island there. But it's worth noting that the regions that are expected to see the most severe storm surge flooding run up into the North Carolina coast, starting at Carolina Beach and moving north through Myrtle Grove into the Wilmington area, with up to 6 foot potential for above ground flooding in some locations or higher. But as we get into Topsail Beach, it appears that severe coastal flooding is likely as predicted by this model. Now the model is just a projection, but it is showing almost complete inundation of many of these barrier islands near the Topsail Beach region. It's also worth noting that storm surge pulses, according to these models, push up into the rivers and estuaries, producing rather severe flooding in certain locations, such as in New Bern or in locations near Stella, as well as near Jacksonville. And this is due to the fact that these estuaries can funnel the storm surge to a higher peak. As the storm surge moves up into a narrower region, there's less place for the water to go. So it's not just the coast that needs to be concerned about storm surge flooding, but areas well inland. And as you can see here, quite a bit of potential storm surge flooding in Long Bay area, near Newport, near Hawkers Island, and in the Core Sound region, particularly Davis and Smyrna. So very severe potentials for storm surge flooding in southeastern North Carolina. I'm just going to zoom out and show you this storm surge map. And with Florence pushing so much water, there's a wide range of regions that could see inundation as the storm approaches the coast. It's worth noting that the track has shifted a bit to the south, so the direct path is moving more toward the Wilmington, Jacksonville area, although regions to the north, as you can see, are expected, at least according to flood models, to see some rather intense storm surge flooding. Thank you for joining me, and I'll be chatting with you soon.